This video will be taking a look at the worst first round picks in the NFL since 2020. Now, all of these guys were first round picks, so they could have a career resurgence at any given time, so keep that in mind as we make our way through the video. With that being said, the first player on today's list is Jeff Okudah, who was taken 3rd overall back in 2020. Standing at 6'1", 205, coming out of Ohio State, he was seen as the prototype for a modern corner. He's lengthy, he tested well, he had no significant injury history, and he was more than willing to get physical and get involved in the run game. Despite all these tools, it just wouldn't click at the pro level, as he gave up a 77% completion percentage when targeted through just 9 games before requiring season-ending surgery on his groin as a rookie. And unfortunately, this would start a long line of injuries for Jeff, who would go on to tear his Achilles in week 1 of his sophomore campaign and miss the rest of 2021 as well. After a successful rehab from that Achilles injury, he would show some signs of the player he was at Ohio State, as he shadowed Justin Jefferson and held him to one of the worst games in his career, and he had this pick 6 here against the Bears. But outside of those 2 games, his play wasn't exactly up to par, so the Lions dealt their former 3rd overall pick for a 5th rounder, which is not a great return considering how high he went in the draft. But the silver lining for Detroit is that they ended up trading this 5th round pick in a package to acquire Pro Bowl safety Brian Branch. So there is a bright side in it for Detroit. Not so much for Okudah though, as he would bounce around the league after Atlanta, as he'd go to the Texans and end up on IR once again, before most recently ending up with the Vikings in 2025, where he played pretty awful, if I'm being honest. He allowed a 92% completion percentage when targeted. Yes, 92 through just 6 games, and he is currently a free agent. 2021 draft class presented me with a tough choice between Zach Wilson and Trey Lance, both horrendous picks who went in the top 3 and turned out to just be awful quarterbacks at the NFL level. But ultimately, I decided to go with Trey Lance, considering the absolute haul the 49ers gave up to acquire him. That haul consisted of 3 first-round picks and a 3rd rounder, which at the time seemed like a lot, and today it has aged horrendously. Middle school me thought that Trey Lance was legit and that he was more than worth this kind of draft capital, but boy was I mistaken. As a rookie, he only played in 3 games, as he had a lingering finger injury in training camp that he eventually needed surgery on to fix. But through those 3 games, he didn't look great, completing under 60% of his passes for about 600 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 2 picks. And this finger injury was in his throwing hand, so maybe we should cut him some slack. He needs some time to learn how to throw the ball again or whatnot. But heading into his 2nd year, it was more of the same. He got the start in week 1 and did not look great at all. Lance definitely would have benefited from being able to come in and sit behind an experienced veteran like Jordan Love, for example, especially considering that he played at North Dakota State, which is an FCS program. But obviously he wasn't granted that luxury, and with the injuries and Brock Purdy being a baller, he wasn't really given a real shot to develop in this league. So I could see him having a resurgence like Sam Darnold or Geno Smith, but considering he was drafted above guys like Jamar Chase, Penei Sewell, Micah Parsons, and Pat Surtain, you just can't justify this pick. Kenny Pickett was the worst first-round pick back in 2022, as he was selected 20th overall by the Pittsburgh Steelers, staying local as he played his college ball in Pittsburgh as well. NFL scouts saw the pocket presence, the touch, and the timing he put on his passes, and the good enough arm, and it made them believe that he would be a good to great quarterback in the NFL. Unfortunately for Pittsburgh fans, that just wouldn't really be the case. Unlike the 2 previous selections on this list, he won't suffer a serious career-altering injury. He just wasn't all that good. He'd sit behind Mitch Trubisky for the first 4 games of his career before finally taking over as a starter, in which he put up mediocre stats at best, averaging just about 185 passing yards per game on only 6 yards per attempt, and he had 9 interceptions to 7 touchdowns. Year 2 would unfortunately be more of the same for Kenny, as less than great individual play and subpar team success would lead to him never regaining the starting job after going down with an ankle injury in week 13. And I am completely out on Kenny Pickett, which sucks to say as he seems like a good enough person. And we've seen the career resurgences from guys like Sam Darnold, Geno Smith, and Baker Mayfield recently, but I just don't see that in the cards for Pickett, as all of the aforementioned guys had dominant play in college or elite traits that showed up throughout their time in the NFL, but you just don't really see that with Kenny Pickett, so I think he'll be a serviceable backup throughout the rest of his career, but that's not what you're aiming to draft at the back end of the first round, making him the worst first-round pick from the 2022 NFL Draft. Tyree Wilson was the worst pick in 2023 as he was selected 7th overall by the Las Vegas Raiders. He's built like Johnny Bravo, and as you can see, standing at 6'6", 275, he was compared to Myles Garrett when he was in college. Obviously, he didn't have the production of a Myles Garrett, but he was no slouch at Texas Tech, as he put up 14 sacks and 27.5 tackles for loss throughout his junior and senior seasons. But as a pro, he's only managed to put up 12 sacks and 15 TFLs through 3 seasons. And he's only missed 1 game up to this point in his career, so it hasn't been injuries or playing time. He just hasn't had it. And when you consider that he was drafted over guys like Bijan Robinson, Jalen Carter, Jahmyr Gibbs, JSN, and Christian Gonzalez, this is a pretty bad pick. But he signed with New Orleans in the offseason, so we'll see if he can revitalize his career down in the boot. 9 was the worst first-round pick of the 2024 draft, and he will be the last player on today's list, as I don't feel like it's very fair to make a pick for the 2025 class, as they've only had 1 year to play in the NFL. But focusing back on McCarthy, he was benched after not even a full season of play after being a top 10 pick in this class. And coming out of Michigan, he was seen as a mobile, proven game manager, and most important of all, a winning quarterback. And while he wasn't asked to carry the team on his back at Michigan, he played in a pro-style Harbaugh offense, which was incredibly appealing to NFL scouts. However, as I'm sure you all know, his play in the NFL has been horrific, despite being in one of the best environments for a quarterback, and especially a young quarterback, having one of the brightest play callers in the NFL today, one of the best wide receivers of our generation, a solid wide receiver too, solid tight end. But despite all this, through 10 starts, he's only posted 1,600 passing yards, 11 touchdowns to 12 interceptions, and only completing about 57% of his passes, while averaging about 6.7 yards per catch, a number that is comically low for a quarterback drafted so high, and comically funny, I guess, for the kids out there watching. But needless to say, these stats and some of these throws you're seeing are just inexcusable for a guy that was taken as high as he was. And he is still very young. He's still got tools. He's still mobile. He's still got a big arm. So with a few years of development, who knows? He could turn his career around. But as it sits right now, he is undoubtedly the worst first-round pick from 2024. That's all I've got for y'all today. If you made it this far, I appreciate you watching. Hope you enjoyed, and if you have any objections to the picks I made in this video, make sure to let me know down in the comments. I'm always open to feedback. And take care.